You keep what is a companion species. Ambassador Zix's upper respiratory membrane fluttered in visible distress. All four of their crystalline eyes dilated into wide, shimmering orbs, like a disco ball about to file an intergalactic HR complaint. A cat, I repeated with practiced calm, holding back a laugh. Just a regular Earth cat. Her name is Princess Murder Brights. The translator struggled. It let out a shriek, crackled, then finally spit out a series of high-pitched whistles that probably meant, what the actual? I can't say I blamed them. Most galactic species barely tolerated apex predators. Humans, on the other hand, named them, fed them, gave them thrones, and made memes about their murder mittens. Let me back up. My name's Sarah Chen. I got my degree in xenobiology thinking I'd work with alien fauna in sterile labs or maybe terraform moon jungles. Instead, I ended up becoming humanity's first official pet liaison to the Galactic Confederation, a role that didn't exist until about 6 months ago when diplomatic relations with Earth took a sharp, furry turn. Everything had been going well. First contact protocols, cultural exchanges, the usual how many stomachs do you have kind of questions. Then the Arkson Cultural Research Committee discovered Earth Internet, more specifically cat videos. Thousands of hours of cats knocking over objects, pouncing on lasers, and sitting on keyboards. It broke them. They have retractable claws, Zix said, their crystalline structure flashing a warning red. They stalk silently, then strike without provocation. Your species lets them roam freely in your dwellings. Yes, I replied, tapping at my data pad. And we reward them for knocking things over with treats. Here, watch this video. It's a classic. No, Zix waved all four arms like I'd pulled out a plague virus. No more videos. The diplomatic corps is still recovering from the last one. One of them batted a glass off a table while making eye contact. That's called a dominance move, I offered helpfully. Zix's entire crystal matrix flickered through a spectrum of purple distress. Why would any sentient species tolerate this behavior? Right then, the universe decided to betray me. Princess Murder Brights made her entrance. She didn't walk in. She glided. Her black fur shimmered like an event horizon, and her fluffy tail curled high with the self-assurance of an empress inspecting her realm. Zix froze, a defense mechanism most crystalline species developed when confronting predators. Unfortunately for Zix, freezing around a cat is basically an engraved invitation. Princess, don't. I began far too late. With elegant murder in her heart, Princess Murder Brights leapt. She landed in the ambassador's lap, kneaded once, and immediately curled into a purring loaf of weaponized cuteness. Zix's translator emitted a sound like a dial-up modem having a panic attack. Human Chen, your miniature apex predator, is vibrating on me. She's purring, I explained gently. That means she likes you. Congratulations. Your furniture now. This is not reassuring. But to their credit, Zix didn't flee. Their colors shifted again, this time to a cautious aquamarine. She's needing me. Is that an attack? She's claiming you. Princess looked up, blinked slowly, and emitted an engine-rattling purr that made the furniture hum. Zix's crystalline body actually harmonized with it, some weird frequency resonance I didn't fully understand, but which apparently felt kind of nice. Fascinating, Zix murmured, extending a hand toward her. If I scratch her here? Princess Murder Brights leaned into the pet like a sovereign blessing, her subject. The sound she made could register on seismic equipment. For the next 3 hours, we conducted Earth's first formal interspecies pet agreement, while Zix served as a glorified heating pad, and I filled out diplomatic paperwork between offering tips on safe tail-scritching techniques. By the end of it, the Galactic Confederation had accepted Earth's request to formalize pet relations, with 57 pages of disclaimers and one extra clause that read, all future negotiations must be held in rooms free of elevated surfaces, laser pointers, and unsecured beverages. When the ambassadors stood to leave, their form glittered with black cat hair and a dazed sort of reverence. Your species miniaturized a lethal predator and then domesticated it by providing food, comfort, and adoration? We don't domesticate cats. I corrected. They tolerate us because we open the cans. Zix paused, glanced down at Princess Murderbrights, now licking her paw and ignoring all diplomacy, and nodded. I shall recommend your reclassification as a class 4 paradox species with a special notation on your ability to weaponize affection. Fair. Want me to start the adoption paperwork? For diplomatic research purposes, Zix said solemnly, naturally, Zixtal, ambassador of the Arxen Crystal Collective, had barely recovered from their last visit to Earth. The purring apex predator that claimed them as living furniture had not only shattered their understanding of interspecies dynamics, but also set a new standard for diplomatic intimacy. So naturally, when the next cultural exchange was scheduled, the ambassador arrived with more caution, more scrolls, and, unbeknownst to them, not nearly enough psychological preparation. This time, I had a new variable to introduce. Ambassador Zix, I said warmly, stepping aside to reveal Max, a golden retriever the size of a small hovercraft, his entire backside wagging like it was trying to break the laws of physics. Meet Max. He's my sister's dog, and for this meeting, your cultural liaison. Zix's crystalline form pulsed once, twice, then went very still. That is larger than your feline apex predator. Yup, I nodded. Friendlier too. Max, say hi. Max, whose philosophy in life was friendship through enthusiasm, responded with his usual display of tail-wagging nuclear joy. He bounded across the room, like a sentient wave of sunshine, sat in front of Zix, and offered one large, slobbery paw. Zix stared at it like it might explode. He wishes to initiate physical contact. Their translator offered helpfully. I gave a thumbs up. Go ahead. That's a handshake. You'll like it. After a moment of awkward internal calculations, Zix extended one of their upper limbs. Max gently placed his paw in it and gave the ambassador a dopey grin, so warm it could melt titanium. He is transmitting joy, Zix murmured in astonishment. Through contact. Fascinating. He is vibrating. Tail wag, I said proudly. It's how dogs display happiness. The more intense, the happier they are. Max is basically a living emotion amplifier. Princess Murderbrights entered the room just in time to see her crystalline throne occupied. She froze mid-step, green eyes narrowing into judgmental slits. Max saw her and gave a bark of joy. Oh no, I said softly. We might be witnessing a territory dispute. What followed could only be described as the most passive-aggressive showdown in galactic history. Princess Murderbrights slinked her way towards Zix's other side, tail twitching with intent. Max, sensing her approach, gave her a friendly lick, pure chaos diplomacy. Princess responded by climbing delicately into Zix's remaining lap space and curling into a loaf of displeased dominance. Zixtal now sat motionless, trapped between two of Earth's apex companions, one radiating nuclear joy, the other vibrating with regal disapproval. Human Chun, Zix said slowly, I believe I am being utilized as an interspecies buffer zone. Yep, I replied, sipping my tea. You've achieved the rare status of cross-species diplomatic furniture. Congratulations. Max rested his head on Zix's knee. Princess began purring, deliberately louder than usual. I do not know how to process this, Zix admitted. That's okay, I said gently. Neither do we. That's why we invented dog parks and cat memes. Humanity doesn't process, we vibe. At that moment, Max flopped onto his back, inviting belly rubs. Princess blinked in slow feline judgment, and Zixtal, to their everlasting credit, reached out and patted both at once. I am oddly comforted. Welcome to Earth. We conducted the rest of the diplomatic meeting with Zixtal flanked by two wildly different representations of Earth's predator-taming madness, each demanding affection in their own unique way. By the end of it, Zix had requested documentation on dog breeds, canine-assisted therapy, and something called Fetch. And I, dear reader, had just successfully negotiated Earth's first interstellar dog friendship treaty. It started, as these things often do, with a sunflower seed. One solitary seed, rolling in slow motion across the polished floor of my Earth home office. It glinted under the midday sun filtering through the window, bounced twice off Max's snoring tail, and came to a final dignified rest against the base of Ambassador Zixtal's lower limb. Zix, startled from reviewing the latest pet accord, clause revisions for rodent containment, blinked all four crystalline eyes. Human Chun, they said, their tone cautious. There appears to be a rogue nutrient capsule loose within your residence. Ah, I said, sipping my tea with the slow dread of someone who had already read this script before. That would be one of Professor Chaos's offerings. As if summoned by narrative timing and poor impulse control, Professor Chaos emerged from his intricate plastic fortress like a furry whirlwind of ambition. He darted out of his enclosure, grabbed the seed, stuffed it in his cheek pouch, and disappeared back inside his tiny habitat, only to repeat the performance 5 seconds later with another seed. Zix watched in slowly dawning horror as the process repeated. A sunflower seed would somehow appear, sometimes from a secret stash, sometimes from a physics-defying ricochet, and the hamster would retrieve it, unbothered by spatial logic or conservation of mass. I have witnessed this loop now 7 times. Zix said, "Your rodent is defying temporal probability." That, I said, setting my tea down, is why he's called Professor Chaos. Spike, my top hat-wearing bearded dragon, glanced over briefly from his basking rock, as if offering academic endorsement. Max the retriever snorted in his sleep. Princess Murder Brights narrowed her green eyes from her perch atop the bookcase. He has developed an infinite seed loop, Zix continued, kneeling slightly to observe the professor's latest extraction. This should not be possible. I did warn the Confederation, I replied, crossing my arms, that hamsters are small, fuzzy black holes for snacks. But where is the origin point? Zix said, voice climbing into what I recognized as their crystal meltdown in progress octave. The habitat contains no storage compartment of that capacity. He's either discovered extra-dimensional storage, I said casually, or he's figured out how to bypass conservation laws using pure hamster determination. Another seed, another run, another stuffing of cheeks. Princess Murder Brights hopped down from her perch and sauntered to the habitat, staring into the enclosure like a queen contemplating a mad prophet. I believe she's begun to worship him, I said, or plot his demise. Zix countered. Could be both. The professor darted out again, but this time, mid-seed capture, paused dramatically to stare directly at Zix. The alien froze. He sees me? Zix whispered. Oh, he's been watching you all morning. The hamster stuffed the seed, turned to face Zix squarely, and without breaking eye contact, performed a backward somersault back into his lair. His will began to spin. No one had touched it. Zix's crystalline body began glowing pale blue. I must update my report. Immediately. To include what? I asked. That your companion rodent has unlocked perpetual motion, Zix said, and possibly sentience. Does he have a job? He's the official chief of Microfortress Logistics and Snack Acquisition Strategy for the Interstellar Pet Relations Division. Zix took a deep, shimmering breath. Of course he is. At that moment, Jake walked in holding a clipboard and a small bottle of sesame treats. Hey, Sarah, I restocked the professor's treat chamber. Also, he built a second wheel inside the original wheel. Is that normal? I just pointed to the hamster. You ask him. Professor Chaos emerged, turned in a tight circle, and pulled a tiny whiteboard from behind a paper towel tube. Written on it, in disturbingly precise marker script, "Don't interrupt the loop." Zix dropped their data pad. He writes, "We're working on his literary debut," I said proudly. "It's called Entropy in a Plastic Ball, The Memoirs of a Snack-Sworn Rodent." Max, now awake and watching the professor's continuous harvesting ritual, gave a happy bark that startled Princess Murder Brights, who leapt gracefully atop Zix's shoulder, dislodging several of their diplomatic ribbons. The professor paused again, cheeks overstuffed, looked up at the chaos, and gave a single meaningful squeak. And somehow we all understood it, all according to plan. By the time the Galactic Confederation's emergency observers arrived, drawn by reports of snack-based singularity anomalies, Professor Chaos had officially been recognized as an independent microentity of significance. His wheel was now triple-layered, his cheeks measurably larger than his body. Ambassador Zix filed a new category for Earth in the Xenobiological Database, Class Omega Loop, indicating species capable of domesticating entropy through rodent-based storage violations. The humans, meanwhile, started selling miniature lab coats and white bards for hamsters online. Spike got his monocle polished. Princess Murder Brights resumed surveillance. Max, as always, just wanted someone to throw a ball. And Professor Chaos, he simply kept running, and stuffing, and smiling, as the infinite snack loop continued. "Please tell me you're joking," Ambassador Zix murmured, their crystalline form pulsing with stress light as their forearms hovered in alarm near my desk. "You keep miniature dragons as companions." "Technically," I said, setting a tiny top hat gently onto Spike's regal, spiky head, "he's a bearded dragon. It's a species of lizard. But I like to think of him as a tiny gentleman with scales and a taste for fashion." Spike basked motionlessly under his heat lamp, eyes half-lidded in what could only be described as existential calm. The warm glow made his bronze scales shimmer, and with the addition of the hat, embroidered with a subtle silver crest of crossed crickets, he looked like the very model of Victorian lizard nobility. Zix didn't speak for a full 60 seconds. Their translator crackled as it tried to translate what I could only assume was a multi-layered internal existential shriek. "And you dress them?" "Only on special occasions," I said. "And only if he tolerates it, which Spike does, with grace." The bearded dragon blinked once. "Slow, powerful, meaningful." "I'm sorry," Zix said after a long pause, "but you expect me to report back to the Confederation that humans not only domesticate predatory mammals and semi-carnivorous rodents, but also scaled reptiles. And then you give them accessories. Don't forget titles," I added, holding up a tiny laminated badge. "Spike was recently promoted to Assistant Ambassador of Chill. It's mostly ceremonial, but he did mediate a standoff between Princess Murder Brights and Professor Chaos last week." Max thumped his tail approvingly from the corner of the room, where he lay curled like a golden beanbag of joy. Princess Murder Brights, high on her perch, gave Spike a slow blink of recognition. Or challenge. Hard to tell with her. Professor Chaos, ever the wild card, did a barrel roll in his hamster wheel, the word diplomacy somehow spelled out in sunflower seeds beside him. Zix gestured vaguely toward Spike, careful not to get too close. "And what is his function?" "Function?" I echoed. "He's a mood stabilizer, a sun-powered therapist, a god-tier busker. Also, he eats bugs." Zix froze. "Bugs?" "Yeah, he loves crickets, sometimes worms. Don't worry, we keep it ethical. He gets organic kale on Fridays." The ambassador's translator emitted a distressed beep. This is worse than the hamster. Just then, Spike lifted his head. He turned very slowly and locked eyes with Zix. It was a look that said, "I have seen things. I have chosen peace. Do not test me. I think he likes you," I said brightly. Zix backed up exactly 1.3 meters. "It's calculating my soul weight." "Don't be ridiculous. Spike only judges humans." "Only—" Just then, Spike climbed higher on his basking rock and, with tremendous gravitas, bobbed his head. "What does the bobbing mean?" Zix whispered. "It means you've been accepted." I whispered back. "Or challenged. Hard to tell. Probably both." Max let out a delighted woof. Princess Murder Brights flicked her tail once. Professor Chaos did a celebratory spin in his wheel, knocking over a mini photo frame containing Spike in a top hat beside a rubber duck. Zix reached slowly into their diplomatic satchel, pulled out a small holographic notepad, and began dictating. Memo to Galactic Confederation Cultural Division. Humans have domesticated scaled carnivorous lizards and taught them fashion. They bask under heat lamps like miniature suns. They are titled, decorated, and, most concerning of all, respected as intellectuals. Spike, now thoroughly warmed and satisfied, blinked again and resumed his meditative pose. "I think he's ready for his close-up," I said, pulling out my phone. "Say diplomacy." Zix made the alien equivalent of a groan and held still while I took a commemorative photo of them beside Spike. The bearded dragon looked calm. Zix looked haunted. Later that week, a small photo of Spike in his top hat was seen framed in the Galactic Cultural Archive under the title, "The Ambassador of Chill and the Crystalline Breakdown." Some say Zix keeps a copy on their desk. Spike never confirmed it. Humanchin, Ambassador Zix's voice was calm, collected, and pitched in that crystalline frequency that usually meant they were really trying not to spiral into another interspecies existential crisis. There appears to be an aquatic predator excavating my diplomatic pouch. I didn't even look up from my tea. "That would be River," I said cheerfully. "She's staying with me this week. And she's not excavating, she's curating." River, my sister's pet otter, was currently upside down with her entire torso lodged in Ambassador Zix's crystalline satchel, tail wagging wildly as she extracted her latest treasure, a particularly shiny data crystal that sparkled with every tilt. She gave a pleased squeak and added it to the growing pile of acquisitions she was arranging by sparkle index on the floor. "She steals documents." Zix hissed, though their crystalline lattice vibrated with a frequency I'd come to identify as a blend of resigned disbelief and deepening fascination. "She organizes them too," I pointed out, "by shininess." Zix's color shifted to a hue I mentally dubbed diplomatic fluster. That is not a valid filing system in any galactic institution. Maybe not yet. Before the ambassador could respond, River launched herself into her next favorite activity, transforming sentient diplomats into impromptu water slides. With the grace of an interstellar otter gymnast, she scrambled up Zix's back and whooshed down their smooth crystalline arm with a squeal of joy, hitting the floor and rolling onto her back in a dramatic pose of pure contentment. Max barked once in applause. Princess Murder Brights looked unimpressed from her shelf perch. Spike, of course, blinked slowly from his heat lamp and adjusted his top hat with gentlemanly indifference. Zix froze. "Your aquatic predator is using me as recreational equipment." "She likes you," I said, taking another sip. "That's basically her version of a hug." "That is not what I would consider a comforting gesture," the ambassador muttered. "I was not trained for this level of intimacy." "I don't think anyone is." As if summoned by the rising chaos, Jake poked his head into the room. Sarah, the Centon delegation is here for their scheduled introduction to Earth pets. Should I send them in?" I blinked. "Now." Jake nodded. "They brought their own camera drones." "Perfect. I turned back to Zix, who was currently trying to politely negotiate with an otter over the return of a glowing interstellar treaty draft. You might want to warn them. The sentence entered with the stately grace of sentient bonsai trees bearing bioluminescent foliage. That grace lasted about 5 seconds. River spotted the shimmering leaves. "Oh no," I whispered. The otter made a delighted chirping noise, bolted across the room, and launched herself upward with the zeal of a caffeine-fueled toddler at a bubble wrap convention. She tried, enthusiastically, to gather the Sentin's glowing foliage into her ongoing sparkle collection. The Sentin leader flailed. "Why is the aquatic predator attempting to harvest our bioluminescence?" "She thinks it's decorative moss," I explained. "Probably for her nesting corner." "That's horrifyingly logical," muttered Zix, who was now holding a treaty scroll crumpled slightly from otter theft. Princess Murderbrights, never one to be outdone, leapt down and began knocking the carefully organized data crystals back onto the floor. Max wagged his entire body in anticipation of new friends, while Spike simply raised a brow ridge with Victorian disappointment. Professor Chaos zipped by in his hamster ball like a furry comet of defiance. Zix stood amidst it all like a marble statue suffering an anxiety attack. "This is not diplomacy. This is a circus. Welcome to Earth," I said, "where our greatest diplomatic tool is a fuzzy chaos ambassador who slides down people and steals documents." River had now arranged the Sentin's glowing data pads in a triangle and was belly sliding across them in a loop. Every time she passed Zix, she deposited a shiny item at their feet like a tribute. The ambassador looked down at the pile, then up at me. "She's gifting me stolen goods." "She's adopted you." "I see," Zix said. Their voice had the tone of someone who had not only given up, but was weirdly okay with it. By the time River flopped over, exhausted from her spree of diplomacy via adorable anarchy, the Sentins had fully joined the chaos. One was letting Max lick its leaves. Another was filming a slow-motion video of River's sliding technique. The last one had placed a decorative blossom on Spike's hat. Zix crossed their arms. "We will need a new treaty protocol." "Done," I said, pulling up the draft. "We'll call it the Slide Accord." "Slide Protocol," Zix corrected with a sigh, reaching down to pick up River, who curled contentedly in their arms. "May the stars forgive us." "They already did," I said with a grin. "Now, wait till I introduce you to ferrets." Zix's translator gave up with a sad beep. There are diplomatic moments that define interstellar relationships, treaties signed, alliances forged, the ceremonial exchange of glowing mineral trinkets. And then there are the moments when an aquatic mammal steals your data tablet, a cat attempts wall-climbing parkour, and an alien species shaped like bonsai trees watches the chaos with what can only be described as existential awe. This was one of the latter. The Sentin delegation had arrived precisely on time, punctuality being a deeply ingrained cultural trait of their bioluminescent arboreal species. Their leaf-like appendages glowed in complex rhythms, a silent symphony of diplomacy. I had gone over their file meticulously. Ancient civilization, esteemed philosophers, zero tolerance for disorder. Perfect. The moment they stepped into my Earth-based diplomatic office, however, reality took one look at our preparations and said, "Cute." River the Otter, having recently claimed Ambassador Zix as her personal playground, was mid-slide down the crystalline diplomat's arm when the Sentins entered. She chirped in delight, scattering the carefully arranged treaty documents like autumn leaves in a solar storm. Princess Murderbrights, perched in her judgment spot atop a high shelf, narrowed her glowing green eyes in feline disdain at the newcomers, clearly displeased by the disruption to her observation time. Spike adjusted his monocle. Max barked in welcome. Professor Chaos took a victory lap in his hamster ball, knocking over a data pad and squeaking with the fury of a tiny warlord. Human Chun, the lead sentence translator, buzzed. Is this normal? I opened my mouth to begin damage control when fate, chaos, and Jake the assistant all conspired at once. Jake, bless his curious human soul, decided this was the perfect moment to test out a new interspecies enrichment toy, a laser pointer. The red dot appeared on the floor. Max, Princess Murder Brights, and River froze like synchronized statues. Then war. Princess Murder Brights launched first, her paws a blur of controlled violence and overconfidence. Max bounded in, with tail wagging abandon, trying to chase both the dot and the cat, managing to trip over a chair and knock it sideways. River squeaked, with glee, dove into the fray, and attempted to catch the dot mid-slide. The Sentins were paralyzed. This is not in the report. One of them whispered, their leaves flickering an emergency pattern of alarm and curiosity. Ambassador Zix tried to intervene, stepping into the chaos just as Princess Murder Brights rebounded off the floor and used his lower arm as a springboard. Max, still committed to friendship, tried to lick the Sentin diplomat. River dove under the coffee table and emerged holding a glowing data crystal that definitely didn't belong to her. And then the red dot appeared on the wall. The sudden vertical migration of the dot transformed the living room into a three-dimensional battlefield. Princess Murder Brights attempted a heroic leap that landed her on the curtain rod. Max barked encouragement. River knocked over a bowl of space treats. And the Sentins? The Sentins did what all ancient civilizations do when faced with something they can't process. They started taking notes. One of them murmured, "Is it a deity?" "I believe it is a form of psychological warfare." Another whispered, "The way it manipulates the apex predators." Zix, now covered in both cat hair and otter paw prints, turned to me with a crystalline twitch in their voice. "Human Chun, is the dip real?" "No," I said, breathless from trying to contain both laughter and Max, "but it might as well be." Eventually, after Princess Murder Brights claimed victory by swatting the laser pointer itself off the table, classic, and River tucked herself into Max's tail fluff for a nap, and Spike solemnly nodded his approval, the Sentins requested a formal debrief. "Your species," the lead Sentin began, "appears to possess not only control over dangerous predators, but also the ability to distract them with intangible, light-based illusions. You use this dot as a tool, toy, entertainment, exercise, social experiment." I shrugged. "We call it the red dot." The Sentin looked at me gravely, "And it is uncatchable. By design," I said. "That's kind of the point." The lead Sentin stood up, leaf arms pulsing with something akin to reverence. "You have taken creatures of pure instinct and taught them to chase the unattainable endlessly." There was a pause. "Truly, your chaos is weaponized." Max thumped his tail in agreement. Princess Murder Brights, now curled atop the Sentin leader's glowing shoulder with her claws retracted, and a smug purr, emitted a long, satisfied sigh. "Please send us the schematics for this." The Sentin requested. "Our philosophical council will need to meditate on its meaning." By now, my reputation as the director of interspecies chaos management and tiny hat distribution had cemented itself throughout the Galactic Confederation, which is why I wasn't particularly surprised when a formal request arrived on my desk, written in glitter ink on scented parchment, summoning me and my entourage of domesticated chaos to a high council summit focused on fashionable companion species diplomacy. The sender? A newly formed, completely unofficial, but wildly influential group calling themselves the Fashionably Feral Council, comprised of various alien diplomats, scientists, and cultural attaches. The Council's stated mission was to embrace Earth's aesthetic paradoxes and elevate galactic pet fashion to new dimensions of cultural resonance. I brought the whole team. Max trotted in with his new bow tie made of solar silk. Princess Murder Brights, resplendent in a velvet cloak embroidered with moons, wrote atop her personal transport orb, read, Jake pushing a pillow on a hover trolley. Professor Chaos had a custom-made cape with tiny pockets sewn in for seed storage, and he'd learned to pose dramatically mid-spin. Spike wore his standard top hat and monocle, but now he had a cane, a very small, very shiny cane made of recycled star metal. And River the Otter? She wore nothing but a sash that read Diplomatic Mischief in Progress, which she had definitely stolen from someone else's luggage. As we entered the chamber, I caught the sight of Ambassador Zix already present, their crystalline form now sparkling faintly with glitter from River's previous visit. The Centon delegation shimmered nearby, their bioluminescent foliage gently pulsing in anticipation. Human Chun, Zix said with the solemnity of someone who had experienced every possible stage of emotional breakdown and come out sparkly on the other side. I must once again beg for clarification. Is it normal for a predator to wear a monocle and demand tea service? That's Spike's 3 p.m. ritual, I replied smoothly, accepting a teacup from Filbert, the ever-helpful sentient paperwork tentacle now moonlighting as an event butler. I see, Zix replied, though their colors indicated they did not see at all. The fashionably feral council, for their part, was absolutely enchanted. A delegation of Trilix, gelatinous shapeshifters, demonstrated their attempts to mimic Max's bow tie using strands of their own bodies. A Lithari diplomat, wearing what could only be described as a kinetic furball hat, took notes on Princess Murder Brights's disdainful grace. Someone from the Arkan species offered River a crystal tiara, which she immediately used to reflect light beams onto the ceiling to start another game of red dot tag. Halfway through the summit, an unexpected addition arrived. A massive reptilian diplomat from the Draxier Empire, flanked by what looked like a juvenile ceratopsian creature wearing a tutu. This is KRRR. The ambassador growled proudly. My hatchling companion. She has decided she enjoys Earth's aesthetic stylings. The tutu had stars. Princess Murder Brights gave a slow, approving blink. That was as close to a diplomatic alliance as it got. Then came the runway portion of the summit. Yes, the fashionably feral council had organized a fashion walk, complete with holographic spotlights, a zero-gravity runway ring, and background music that changed tempo based on the animal's stride. Filbert served as the MC, floating a microphone and mispronouncing everyone's names in the most charmingly bureaucratic way possible. Spike strutted with gentlemanly precision. River did cartwheels halfway down the runway and disappeared into someone's purse. Max's tail wagged so hard he reversed the orbit of a decorative drone. Professor Chaos launched himself from a wheel-shaped platform and landed in a victory pose worthy of opera. And Princess Murder Brights, she glided, draped in velvet, eyes glowing, every step deliberate. Somewhere in the background, a Trilix fainted. After the show, several council members submitted requests for their own Earth companion animals, along with detailed descriptions of appropriate attire. The Lithari wanted a pug in a jetpack vest. The Trilix requested a hedgehog wearing armor. The Draxier ambassador demanded a hamster in power armor, presumably for intimidation purposes. I believe, Zix muttered beside me as we watched River attempt to abscond with a laser pointer shaped like a duck, that your species is not merely chaotic. You are influentially chaotic. I'll take that as a compliment, I said cheerfully, accepting a trophy handed to me by a robotic jellyfish with a monocle of its own. Human Chun, Zix said slowly, how many more creatures do you have prepared to unleash upon us? I grinned. Have I told you about ferrets? The translator exploded in static. Sarah Chun had long since learned that the easiest way to initiate existential dread in the Galactic Confederation was to do something perfectly normal by human standards, like microwaving leftover pizza, or explaining Halloween, or as it turned out, waving around a laser pointer. The concept of direct light-based entertainment for apex predators had caused a small, localized panic the last time Sarah activated one in front of the Sentinel delegation. They were still drafting new protocols to classify dangerous reflected photon anomalies under interspecies treaty law, which, naturally, made today the perfect day to test out her new hypothesis that the red dot was not just entertainment, but philosophy, a cosmic metaphor, if you will, an explanation for Earth's unique diplomatic chaos, all embodied in one glowing speck of temptation. Are you sure this is wise? Ambassador Zix asked, hovering nervously by the curtains. Their crystalline body shimmered, with stress spectrum light, somewhere between curious and why are we like this? Oh, definitely not, Sarah said cheerfully, brandishing the laser pointer like a Jedi with a novelty weapon. But it'll be educational. Probably. Max, the golden retriever, was already vibrating in place like a tail-wagging tuning fork. His eyes locked onto the red, that the instant it lit up the floor. Princess Murder Brights, ever the hunter-philosopher queen, had leapt silently to the back of the couch in predatory readiness. Spike the bearded dragon lifted his head solemnly from his sunning rock, watching with regal indifference. Professor Chaos peeked out of his hamster tube. And River the otter, she was crouched low in the shadows, ready to pounce like some adorable water-dwelling ninja. The Sentinel delegation was assembled once again, bioluminescent fronds swaying gently. This time, they were joined by a few representatives from the Anax Coalition, gelatinous scholars who believed they could understand any civilization through its recreational behaviors. They had no idea what they were walking into. Observe, Sarah said, sweeping the pointer across the rug. Chaos. Glorious chaos. Max lunged forward, skidding on the hardwood, paws scrambling. River darted from under the coffee table with the kind of speed that implied caffeine or divine inspiration. Princess Murder Brights pounced with surgical precision, missing the dot but knocking over the snack tray meant for the delegates. The red dot danced, uncatchable, mocking, eternal. The sentence leaned forward. It eludes them, one murmured, awe in their glowing leaves. Indeed, a gelatinous diplomat hummed. They pursue it still, despite failure. It is the unattainable truth, said a third. A metaphor for knowledge, perhaps, or enlightenment. No, Zix said, their translator vibrating like a tuning fork. It's just a dot. It doesn't mean anything. It is not profound. It's chaos with batteries. Sarah chuckled. Ah, but that's where you're wrong. This is pure Earth philosophy. See, the dot is the future. Everyone chases it. Nobody catches it. It disappears when you finally get close. It only exists when someone makes it appear. The Anax paused, quivering in contemplation. Princess Murder Brights leapt to the windowsill and yowled in frustration. Max barked at the ceiling. River jumped on the couch, squeaked, and rolled off again. Professor Chaos somehow turned his wheel into a launch mechanism and flew gracefully through the air, landing in a pile of abandoned data scrolls. Spike closed one eye slowly, as if judging them all. It was perfect. Zix made a sound like 1,000 tiny chimes, sighing. You are weaponizing absurdity. Yup, Sarah said proudly, turning off the laser pointer. The chaos froze. Every eye, canine, feline, otter, crystalline, turned to her. And with that, I declare our demonstration complete. Max flopped to the floor in dramatic exhaustion. Princess Murder Brights gave her tail a final disdainful flick and retreated to her perch. River collected a few fallen Sentinel leaves and stacked them like coins. Spike licked his eyeball. Professor Chaos tucked himself into a corner of his wheel and spun slowly, like a tiny philosopher in deep meditation. The Sentinels began scribbling rapidly. One of them held up a frond. We believe this proves Earth is not bound by conventional logic. You chase the unattainable for joy. You revel in futility. You find meaning in nonsense. Zix turned to Sarah with a resigned expression. You've created a philosophical incident with a cat toy. I do my best work with chaos, Sarah replied, sipping her tea. It's practically our national language. Ambassador Chen, a new voice crackled through the intercom. The Plurathians are requesting clarification on what a zumi is, and the Arantari ambassador wants to know why their pet translator is malfunctioning every time they try to understand ferret logic. Perfect, Sarah grinned. Tell them we'll be ready to demonstrate shortly. Zix groaned. Please tell me you don't have a ferret. I don't, Sarah said, but I know someone who does, and he wears a tiny backpack. The Annex representatives collapsed into contemplative blobs of philosophical appreciation. And so, the laser pointer had done what no treaty, lecture, or cultural exchange ever could. It explained humanity's absurd genius. In the gleam of the dot, the chase, the joy of the meaningless pursuit, aliens saw something profound, something ridiculous, something human. Earth wasn't just a paradox anymore. It was an art form. By now, Earth had long ceased to be seen as just another quirky member of the Galactic Confederation. Thanks to Max's tail diplomacy, Princess Murder Bright's velvet tyranny, Professor Chaos's snack-based entropy, Spike's fashionably reptilian stoicism, and River's aquatic treasure heists, the Confederation had declared Earth not just a Class O paradox zone, but the official headquarters for something far more unthinkable: the Institute for Companion Paradox Research. It was located in an orbital facility floating above Earth, retrofitted from what was originally intended to be a diplomatic observation station. It now resembled a chaos-sculpted museum, with decorative hamster wheels, mini cat thrones, heated basking rocks, and water slides that weaved between gravity-neutral walkways. Every species who had ever asked, "Why do humans willingly cohabitate with predators in miniature costumes?" was invited. The first day of operations began, as all things do in Earth-related diplomacy, with snacks and confusion. I stood at the entrance in my newly issued lab coat, which had been specially modified to hold treats, laser pointers, and emergency calming bacon for Max. The sign above us shimmered in 10 languages. Institute for Companion Paradox Research. Enter with curiosity, leave with existential questions. Ambassador Zix, now serving as co-director and honorary emotional support Crystal, had taken the liberty of developing the initial curriculum. Today's lecture, they announced, their crystalline structure flashing with scholarly teal, will be on the philosophical implications of prey-predator cohabitation and the implications of symbiotic absurdity. We're starting with Spike, I added, because he brought a slideshow. At that moment, Spike the gentleman dragon, perched atop a wheeled podium, bobbed his bearded head, and activated the projector. Each slide featured him in various outfits: bowler hat, monocle, kilt, and in each one, he was surrounded by peacefully coexisting companions. Max drooling with joy, Princess Murder Bright's disdainfully close but never attacking, River napping beside him in an otter pile, and Professor Chaos midstuff with sunflower seeds. Slide 12 was titled Predator Peace Packs and the Joy of Tiny Furniture. Adorable, murmured a spore-based delegate from the Maltari Concordium. But fundamentally wrong, added a gelatinous being with 14 theoretical degrees in predatory instinct theory. How do they not kill each other? We give them treats, I explained, and we tell them they're good. River demonstrated this by promptly stealing the gelatinous being's notebook and arranging it alphabetically with shiny rocks. Princess Murder Brights pounced onto the observation table, giving a judgmental glance that could destabilize an ego. Max, delighted by the sudden audience, sat in the center and offered his paw to everyone in proximity. Professor Chaos ran so fast in his wheel, It momentarily caused localized wind. A pair of ethereal entities from the Department of Fundamental Constants whispered among themselves. This is either advanced pacifism or reality denialism. Zix cleared their throat, producing a pleasant bell tone. We call it structured chaos with snack reinforcement, they said. And thanks to it, interspecies cooperation has increased by 173% on planets where humans and their companion animals are present. Another delegate raised a pseudopod. What about aggression? Cats are allowed to push things off tables once per hour. Otters may claim 3 shinies a day. Dogs receive belly rubs on a rotational schedule. Hamsters, we just let them vibe. But what happens when it all breaks down? Then we bring out the laser pointer. I clicked the activation button, and a glowing red dot danced across the polished floor. Max lunged. Princess Murder Bright slinked into full predatory crouch. River chittered with joy and went belly down to pounce. Professor Chaos leapt from a perch to join the pursuit, doing a perfect spin midair. Even Spike gave the dot a contemplative glance before returning to his tea. The delegates watched, stunned, as the chaos crescendoed in beautifully choreographed disorder. I believe, said the lead sentient delegate slowly, this is functional anarchy. Exactly. Zix beamed, proud in a way only a being made of living quartz could be. Welcome to Earth Logic. The lecture concluded with an open Q&A session. Questions included. Do snakes wear hats? What is a guinea pig and why does it scream? Why do your animals experience something called zoom eyes at 3 a.m.? Can we clone Spike? To which Spike firmly adjusted his tie and replied with a head bob that translated to, only with proper royalties. In the following days, the Institute developed an official curriculum. Laser pointer ethics, chaos diplomacy 101, treat theory, predator coexistence through purring, hamster wheel power generation, experimental. Each course featured practical demonstrations, emotional support muffins from Filbert the Paperwork Tentacle, our new hospitality director, and optional cuddle breaks in the fluff room. Ambassador Zix and I were already drafting plans for a satellite institute focused on aquatic mischief and its implications for space dock security. River had volunteered as keynote speaker, and so, amid glittering data charts, paw prints on official documents, and one too many sunflower seed-induced vacuum malfunctions, the galaxy's first truly interspecies research institute thrived. It was as Professor Chaos's official report stated, with seed-crusted paw print confirmation, adorably destabilizing, with maximum paradox saturation. It started with a single, perfectly balanced accessory, a crimson velvet top hat, no bigger than a bottle cap, stitched with golden thread and trimmed in stardust-dyed ribbon. Spike, the bearded dragon, wore it with the dignified gravitas of a seasoned statesman, as he perched regally beneath his heat lamp, monocle shimmering and tail gently curled. An entire assembly of intergalactic researchers stared in stunned reverence. Sarah Chun didn't blink. She had seen this effect before. It was, by now, a well-documented phenomenon. Let the record show, Zixtal declared from the podium, their crystalline arms clasped behind their back, that the moment the tiny hat was introduced, the ambient emotional stability of the research chamber increased by 14%, and one of the Brent scholars entered what their translator describes as a state of joyful surrender. There was a respectful pause as the squid-like Brent emitted a soft ripple of bioluminescence and offered what might have been applause, or a mating signal. Honestly, with the Brent, it was always a toss-up. Across the room, the rest of the Earth pets prepared for their now-famous diplomatic companion review. Princess Murder Brights, robed in dark silk and sporting a wide-brimmed fascinator with solar flare embroidery, leapt onto the viewing platform with calculated flair. The hat remained perfectly tilted as she strutted along a display rail, swatting down any ill-placed laser pointers with royal disdain. Max, in his custom-tailored suit jacket and golden bone-shaped lapel pin, bounded up with uncontainable joy. His hat, a dashing mini fedora perched between his ears. The moment he tipped it, accidentally but charmingly, the entire gelatinous delegation from Quark's 7 wept in unison. Beside them, River the Otter performed synchronized spins in a holographic puddle while wearing a water-resistant captain's cap. The sentient delegates, ancient, bioluminescent tree beings with a deep sense of fashion hierarchy, nodded solemnly and noted that the chapeau technique of otterkind merited further study. Professor Chaos, meanwhile, had somehow escaped his habitat and was now running in circles on the observation table, wearing a tiny newsboy cap. His cheeks were, predictably, full of seeds. The hat jiggled with each bounce. "You're witnessing what we've termed accessory-induced paradox equilibrium," Sarah said, addressing the gathered crowd of intergalactic researchers, diplomats, and exhausted translators. "It's simple. Take an apex predator, dress it in formal wear, and the cognitive dissonance short circuits most conflict responses." A tentacled historian raised a shimmering appendage. "Are there any risks to this method?" Sarah paused. "Only if the hat falls off. That can cause a rapid spike in what we call cuteness-triggered chaos volatility. But we've implemented fail-safes." At that moment, Filbert the sentient paperwork tentacle glided into the room, balancing a tray of interdimensional muffins with one tendril while carefully adjusting Spike's monocle with another. The applause was deafening. Zix stepped forward again, their crystalline form glowing with focused intensity. "The Confederation has reviewed the findings. We are officially expanding the Companion Paradox Integration Act to include a dedicated hat research division. Effective immediately, all Confederation embassies must be equipped with Earth-standard pet attire including, but not limited to, bow ties, top hats, dragon cloaks, and ceremonial scarves." The diplomat from the Euler Consortium stood, their slime form quivering. "What of feather boas?" "We're still testing those," Sarah said. "Some cats take it as a challenge." Behind her, Princess Murder Brights executed a flawless spin and knocked a rubber duck in a crown off the presentation table. This had become her version of a mic drop. The duck, notably, was wearing a tiny helmet. Later that evening, after the presentation had ended, the team gathered in Sarah's office for celebratory tea and fish-shaped treats. Spike dozed with his hat askew. River made a nest of stolen pens and slid into it happily. Max snored under the table, still wearing his suit. Professor Chaos was nowhere to be seen, which meant he was likely reorganizing Sarah's emergency snack drawer. And Princess Murder Bright sat atop her customary perch, quietly triumphant. "You know," Zix said, sipping tea from a gravity-defying mug, "if you had told me 6 months ago that the stability of intergalactic relations would hinge on tiny hats, I would have assumed you were hallucinating." Sarah smiled, gazing fondly at her furry, scaly, purring team of diplomats. "You're not the first. You won't be the last." From behind a nearby curtain, the red dot activated again. Princess Murder Brights launched like a missile. Max barked. River slid across the floor in pursuit. Professor Chaos emerged from a vent with inexplicable glitter stuck to his fur. And Spike, he sighed deeply, adjusted his monocle, and closed his eyes. Earth's diplomatic legacy, it turned out, was secure. In hats.